The snowstorm is approaching. The sky, once a gray canvas, now grows heavier by the moment. The dark clouds, like patches of ink falling, dye the space into a cold, lifeless hue. The biting wind slices through every corner, blowing so fiercely that the streetlights on the deserted roads cannot stand firm. From the truck, David Miller looks out the window, only seeing a swirling white snowstorm, ethereal, like a boundless void with no beginning or end. David had driven through empty, remote roads far beyond the suburbs. He had been a truck driver for years, a job that rarely paused. Every night he continued working, pouring all his effort into the task to forget the loneliness within. No family, no close friends. Each long road was like a sad melody, and each passing day was a dull ache deep inside. Inside the cabin, the space is quiet and cold. David drives silently, his weary eyes fixed on the road ahead. He no longer feels like life has anything to offer him. His marriage had fallen apart not because of a lack of love, but because of a lack of patience, a lack of understanding between two people who had grown distant. How many nights had he asked himself whether he could find joy in life again? Was there anyone aside from himself who could help him overcome these moments of despair? He sighs, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The cold wind cuts into his skin. From outside, the howling wind sounds like a warning. The storm is drawing near. The truck shakes violently under the force of the wind, but David continues driving. The job must be done. The cargo must be delivered. He is accustomed to this feeling, this sensation of being alone in the face of life's invisible storms. Every night he battles with himself, with his worries, fears, and memories that refuse to be erased. Suddenly, a strange light flashes ahead. David squints, trying to focus. A car is veering off course, its wheels stuck deep in the snow, unable to move. It seems someone is waving their hand. David hesitates for a moment, uneasy. In the dead of night, in the middle of this snowstorm, is it safe to stop and help? He wonders, a hint of doubt rising within him. But then the image of his mother, who had taught him always to help others, comes to mind. Kindness never fades, son. No matter the circumstances, you must always do what's right. David sighs, grips the wheel tightly, and decides to stop. The snowstorm gives him little time. He knows that if he doesn't help immediately, that family will be in danger. He pulls the truck to the side, rolls down the window, and steps outside. The cold wind cuts into his flesh like a knife. The snow covers the ground, sparkling under the truck's headlights. He walks quickly toward the stranded car. As he gets closer, he realizes it's a family. A woman is struggling with something behind the wheel, while a man is trying to push the car out of the snow. Both of them look exhausted and anxious. The children, meanwhile, sit still in the car, their vacant eyes staring through the window. David approaches and gently taps on the window. The woman looks out, her eyes wide with confusion. But relief washes over her as she sees him. She hesitates, then rolls the window down just a little. "Hello, we're stuck. Could you help us?" she says, her voice pleading. David nods, then says nothing more. He begins to work. There's no time for conversation, no time for questions. He quietly removes his jacket and starts inspecting the tires. The man says little as well, only letting out a deep sigh before continuing to help. The snow falls harder now, but David keeps at his task. He is tired, but inside he feels a warmth, a strange sensation he hasn't had in years. In the midst of this fierce snowstorm, he doesn't feel alone. He has a clear purpose, a mission to accomplish. When the family's car is finally freed from the snow, the man and woman look at him with grateful eyes. "Thank you so much," the woman says, her voice trembling from the cold. "We wouldn't know what to do without you." David only smiles, saying nothing. He feels a warmth in his heart, even though the snowstorm still rages outside. But then a familiar feeling stirs within him like an odd ripple in his soul. He looks closely at the woman once more. The features of her face, he feels like he's seen them somewhere before. There's something very familiar, but he can't be sure. "It's fine," David says softly, trying to push the thoughts away. He doesn't want to dwell on unnecessary questions or extend the conversation. The storm is still here, and he must continue his journey. But something within him has shifted. An invisible connection has started to form. David returns to his truck, his footsteps heavy in the cold snow. The strange feeling inside him still lingers. He sits in the driver's seat, turns on the ignition, but his hands are still shaking. His eyes keep glancing at the rearview mirror, following the family's car as it continues down the road. They've been helped, saved from danger. But why does he feel such an odd emptiness? He begins turning the steering wheel, setting the truck back on course. The snow has thickened, blanketing the ground in a layer of white, but David cannot fully focus on driving. His mind spins with unanswerable questions. Why does the woman this family feel so familiar? They're just an ordinary family, nothing special. So why does he feel such a strange connection? David laughs to himself. Maybe it's just the exhaustion and loneliness, he reassures himself. Long nights on empty roads had taught him how to cope with loneliness, but this time it's not as easy. Even though he helped them, his heart still feels unfulfilled. As the truck speeds down the desolate road, David reflects on the days past. He remembers the time he was offered a temporary job by a family when he had nearly lost all hope. The job wasn't significant, but it was a lifeline amid the vast sea of despair. It was that family who gave him the opportunity, and from there, he began to rise. David can never forget their help, but he doesn't remember who they were. He knows they made a huge difference in his life. But could that family be the same one he just helped? Why such a strange coincidence? He isn't sure, but those questions keep gnawing at him. The engine hums loudly in the quiet, pulling him out of his deep thoughts. David takes a deep breath and loosens his grip on the wheel. He tries to calm himself, but it still gnaws at him. Even after helping a family, he can't shake the feeling of being lost. Then, while glancing in the rearview mirror, a familiar light flashes from the family's car. They're moving slowly, but it seems they've overcome the immediate challenges. David smiles instinctively. He silently wishes them well, as if an unspoken bond had been forged, even though no words were exchanged. As a truck driver, David had been to many places, met many people. Each time he passed through unfamiliar lands, he felt like part of an endless journey where people were just passing through each other's lives. But today, something has changed. He is no longer alone on this journey. Though there is no clear connection, he feels a part of something larger, a chain of connections that he can't yet see. He continues driving, but his mind is no longer overwhelmed by sadness and loneliness. The snowstorm still rages outside, but somehow the cold no longer affects him. A sense of relief wells up inside. He knows he did the right thing, and that makes him feel a sense of quiet pride, even in silence. As David continues his journey, he doesn't know that his life has already changed since the moment he stopped to help that family. Everything continues. The snowstorm still rages, but deep in his soul, a warm flame is beginning to ignite. He knows that no matter how harsh life may be, he can still change, and he can still make a difference for those around him. The snowstorm may blur the vision, it may reduce visibility, but it cannot erase the kind acts in this life. And perhaps it is in these snowstorms that people see the true value of kindness and connection in life. David pressed hard on the gas pedal, trying to accelerate through the thick layers of snow covering the road. The snow kept falling without any sign of stopping. The cold gusts of wind hit the windshield so fiercely, blurring his vision. The feeling of loneliness washed over him once again. But this time it was different. There was something in the air, some kind of connection that was making a difference. Suddenly, a faint light flickered ahead. At first glance, it seemed dim, but it made David's heart race. He squinted, trying to make out what it was. It was a car, its headlights still on, but it was stuck in the middle of the road, buried under a blanket of snow. David stopped. In the past, he was used to driving past stranded vehicles without stopping, but this time something told him he couldn't ignore it. He sighed, assessing the situation. The exhaustion from his work, the biting cold of the storm, the haunting memories of a broken past, all seemed to fade away when he decided to pull the truck to the side. This snowstorm wouldn't stop him. After all, there were still things in his life worth protecting. And today, he would protect them. David stepped outside, the wind so strong that he had to lower his head to avoid the snow blowing into his face. His arms curled from the cold. He walked toward the family's car that was stuck. Through the window, he saw the woman inside, waving her hand. She seemed frantic, but her eyes still carried a sense of determination. "Hi, are you okay?" David asked, trying to keep his voice calm to reassure her. The window rolled down slowly. The woman smiled faintly, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her smile. "We're stuck," she said. "Everything keeps slipping, and the car can't move. Can you help us?" David looked around and saw that the family's car was deeply embedded in the snow. The tires spun but didn't budge. The snow was falling harder, and the wind was growing stronger, blowing thick snowflakes into his face. He knew that if he didn't help them right away, they wouldn't get out of this situation. Still, a part of him was concerned. The price of helping others in a situation like this wasn't just the effort, it also involved his own safety. But then he thought of what his mother had taught him: always help others, no matter the cost. He shrugged, not letting hesitation take over. "All right, let me help you." He stepped outside and began assessing the situation. As he worked, the woman remained in the car, her eyes never leaving him. Next to her was a man, probably her husband, who was also struggling to push the car out of the snow, but to no avail. His hands were shaking from the cold, but the determination in his eyes didn't waver. David noticed this, and for a brief moment, he felt a vague connection. David pulled out a tow cable from the back of his truck and began attaching it to their car, observing every detail to ensure that it wouldn't be damaged further. While he worked, the man James came closer. "We're sorry to trouble you in this storm," James said in a tired voice, but with clear gratitude. "We don't know what we would have done without you." David just nodded, offering a tired smile. He understood their feelings. He had been in a similar situation before, with no one to help, no one to rely on. But today, he could do something for them. "It's no problem," David replied, continuing his work. "We need to work quickly before the snow makes things worse." The strange feeling in David's heart wouldn't go away. While working, he couldn't help but recall his own past. A few years ago, he had been in a similar situation. He had lost his job, lost his faith in life, and didn't know where to go. It was a family who helped him, then giving him a temporary job and a chance to rise. That gratitude still lingered in David's heart to this day. He silently thanked that family for giving him an opportunity, and now he was able to help another family. Finally, after several attempts, the family's car was freed from the snow. They couldn't continue immediately, but at least they had escaped danger. "Congratulations," David said, tired but offering a faint smile. "Now you can continue your journey." The woman, Sarah, looked at him with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you so much. Without you, we wouldn't know what to do." Her voice cracked as if her words couldn't fully express her appreciation. James patted David on the back, his eyes full of gratitude. "We don't know how to thank you." David just smiled faintly, feeling warmth in his heart. He didn't need thanks, didn't need anything grand. It was simply that he had helped them, and that brought him a sense of peace amid the storm. Before leaving, Sarah looked at him once more, her eyes filled with affection, as though she had recognized something but couldn't quite express it. Perhaps it was appreciation, perhaps familiarity, but she couldn't be sure. "Drive safely," she said, her voice still tinged with concern. David nodded and stepped away from the car. His heart suddenly beat a little faster. As his truck started and he drove away from them, a question kept echoing in his mind. Is it them, right? David couldn't answer that question. He only knew that inside him, some kind of connection was slowly being formed, even without words being spoken. For a brief moment, he had done the right thing, and that was what he needed to continue his journey. David returned to his truck, sat in the driver's seat, and pressed the gas pedal. The truck shook as it fought against the storm. But David's mind couldn't focus on driving. The images of the family he had just helped lingered in his mind. Even though the car had been freed from the snow, he couldn't shake the strange feeling of familiarity. The image of Sarah, the woman, haunted him. Though he couldn't remember the details clearly, he felt like he had met her somewhere before, in some distant time. David drove slowly, crossing snow-covered roads, the headlights casting a beam of hope through the vast darkness. The snow continued to fall, piling up on the road. But his heart was not as cold as the world outside. Something inside him had changed, and that feeling kept him from focusing on his work like he usually would. At that moment, his mind drifted back to the difficult days when he had nowhere to go, when his work and life were in turmoil, and he felt hopeless. It was then that a family had appeared like a light in the darkness. They had given him a temporary job and words of encouragement that he would never forget. Remembering that scene, his heart stirred with emotions he couldn't explain. What is happening to me, he wondered. Am I trying to make up for what has been missing? Or am I simply trying to do good, trying to find meaning in this life? Suddenly, the sound of a horn startled him. A large truck was passing by him, going much faster than the road conditions allowed. David furrowed his brow, watching the truck pass, only to see a familiar image. It was the car of the family he had just helped. He quickly accelerated to catch up with the truck, trying to look more closely through the window. This time, Sarah was sitting in the front seat, still maintaining a serious expression, but she seemed lighter now, having escaped danger. But what caught his attention was her gaze. Those eyes seemed so familiar, like he had seen them somewhere in his memories. David told himself it must be his imagination. These strange, vague feelings could just be the result of exhaustion, the sleep deprivation from days of driving. But somehow the memories of that family kept playing in his mind like old films running in his head. David pressed the gas pedal again, trying to push away these uncontrollable emotions. He knew he had to focus on his work. The snowstorm was still raging, and if he wasn't careful, he could end up in danger. But somehow Sarah's eyes haunted him. Every time he looked at the dim light from their car, he saw the resilience in her eyes, a strong woman, a mother trying to protect her family in the midst of the wild storm. Suddenly he remembered the first time he met them, when they had stopped to ask for his help. He recalled the small details, like the way she looked at him when asking for help and the way the man had shaken his hand. There was something so familiar in that encounter, something that made him feel like they had known each other before, but maybe it was just a coincidence. Anyway, he didn't have much time to think about it. A moment later, he noticed the family's car slowing down and stopping at a corner. David worried, wondering if they had encountered another problem. He pressed the gas pedal, heading toward them. As he got closer, he saw Sarah standing outside the car, looking around as if searching for something. James, her husband, stood beside her, his hands on his hips, appearing to assess the situation. The children were sitting in the car, their faces smeared with snow, but looking less fearful than before. David lowered the window and looked out. "Is everything okay?" he asked, trying to remain calm. Sarah turned to look at him, a light smile crossing her face. "Thank you so much. We just needed to stop for a bit to check if we were lost. The storm is really terrible, but at least we've gotten through the worst of it." David nodded, feeling a little relieved to see they were still okay. "Be careful, don't drive too fast in these conditions. The storm hasn't passed completely." "We'll go slow, thanks for the warning," James said, his eyes filled with gratitude. David felt something stir in his heart, a feeling he couldn't describe. It wasn't just ordinary concern, but a connection he couldn't explain. A part of him still wanted to stay with them, ask more about their family, about what had happened in the past, but he didn't dare to speak. "Good luck," he said, then turned the truck around to continue his journey. David's truck rolled down the empty road again, but this time he didn't just feel the physical fatigue. There was also a heaviness in his heart. That feeling, both familiar and new, made him think more deeply. Everything around him was still the same. The snow kept falling, the snowstorm still raged, but David's heart felt very different. He had helped a family. But what he received in return wasn't just gratitude. It was a vague memory, a strange connection that he couldn't fully understand. It was part of a circle that he hadn't yet seen, a circle of kindness and connection that he once thought he had lost. And perhaps today was the day he would never forget. David continued driving, although his hands still felt heavy on the steering wheel, and his mind was filled with intertwined thoughts. He couldn't understand why he felt such familiarity with the family he had just helped. A strange feeling lingered, as if he had known them for a long time, even though he had never met them before. All night David had driven through countless snow-covered roads, but the emptiness inside him remained unchanged. Every time he thought of that woman, Sarah, some image from his memory resurfaced, a connection that was unclear, yet strong. He couldn't explain it. Her eyes, the way she looked at him when asking for help, it felt like they shared some bond that he couldn't grasp. David tried to push these thoughts out of his head. The snowstorm was still raging outside, and the work he was doing didn't allow him to let his mind wander for too long. Yet somehow he felt an increasing need to decipher this feeling. Had he met that family somewhere in his past? Or was it just a coincidence that made him feel this way? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. A part of him wanted to call that family again, ask them one more time how they were doing, but his reason told him not to. He had already done enough. He had helped them out of a dangerous situation, and now it was time to continue his journey. He reminded himself that if he didn't learn how to maintain distance, he'd lose himself in endless questions that would never have clear answers. But then a different thought flickered in his mind. They can't be strangers, he told himself, and in that moment a memory flashed by, an obscure scene. A familiar look, and he began to feel like he was about to solve the mystery of this strange sensation. It was late at night, but the snowstorm showed no sign of letting up. The light from the truck's headlights barely illuminated the road ahead, and the darkness around him was thick like a dark velvet curtain. David trudged down the lonely road with no one beside him but himself. At that moment, he noticed that the exhaustion had made everything feel blurry. His mind was weighed down with tangled thoughts, and his eyes were growing dim. Suddenly, a scene from the past appeared clearly in his mind, like a slow-motion film. It was a winter morning from the previous year when he was wandering through empty streets, feeling hopeless with no loved ones, no place to return to. He remembered very well that he had been standing outside a small store, waiting, hoping to find an opportunity. Everything in him seemed to have run dry. But at that moment, a family had stopped beside him, and they invited him into their home. It was Sarah's family. He remembered those days when he had lost his job, when there was no one to share with, when the dark days seemed to stretch on forever. It was Sarah and James who opened their hearts to him, gave him a temporary job, and offered words of encouragement. During that time, he felt a genuine care, a warmth he had never found anywhere else. Their family had become the only support in his life at that time. He never expected that the same family would be the ones he helped today in this snowstorm. His mind suddenly felt dizzy, a mental shock that he couldn't explain. Everything now seemed to make sense. They were the ones who had helped him when he needed it most. And now he had been the one to help them in their time of need. David suddenly stopped the truck, gripping the steering wheel tightly. A lump rose in his throat. Everything he had done, everything he had experienced, all seemed to have a reason. He looked in the rearview mirror where Sarah's family's car was still slowly moving behind him. The feeling he had now was difficult to describe. He couldn't just be someone passing through their lives. But at the same time, he couldn't just be a friend without some deeper connection. The light from their car was gradually dimming in the night. But in David's heart, that light would never fade. He realized something profound within himself. Helping others wasn't just about giving without receiving. Maybe life didn't always offer answers to every question, but kindness and sharing brought each person a small part of happiness. David continued driving, but now he no longer felt lonely. His mind had become clearer. He knew he wasn't the only one in this storm. No matter how cold the outside world was, in every heart, a flame always burns. That flame is kindness sharing and connections that we sometimes don't recognize immediately. He continued driving through the night, but now everything seemed lighter. The snowstorm outside no longer felt so frightening. He knew that even if he had to continue down these long and cold roads, he wasn't alone. There were people who would always be there, even if they were only faint figures in his memory. They would always be a part of this life. And in David's heart, a smile blossomed in the snowstorm. That feeling, that realization, was like a beam of light in the darkness. They weren't just people he had helped, they were a part of him. David's truck continued gliding down the snow-covered road, the headlights shining like a beam of hope in the quiet night. He still couldn't shake the strange feeling when thinking about Sarah's family. It was like a knot in his soul. Something he needed to figure out, something he needed to understand. Everything about them, from Sarah's face to James's eyes, felt like missing puzzle pieces that he had always been searching for, as if they had appeared in his life a long time ago. But time had dulled their presence. David couldn't remember the exact details of his first encounter with them. But the feeling of that day when he had lost his job and felt desperate was clear as day. He had been wandering the empty street without money, without a home, without a goal. Everything in his life seemed to fall into darkness. And it was then that Sarah's family appeared. His memory played out like a slow-motion film. Sarah had smiled when she saw him standing outside a small cafe, dusty and gaunt. James, with a calm gaze, hadn't asked much, but in his eyes David could see care and understanding. They invited him into their home, gave him a temporary job, and slowly helped him overcome difficulties for a long time. For the first time in his life, David felt like he had a place to return to, a family he had never had. They weren't strangers, they were the ones who gave him a second chance to rise. And now that same family had reappeared in his life, in this snowstorm, as a sign of return. But why had they come back at this moment in these circumstances? David couldn't help but ask himself. Was it just a coincidence, or was it some accidental circle that life had brought him? Why, when he was struggling with his loneliness, had they appeared as a source of motivation? A reminder of the good things he had forgotten. As the light from Sarah's family's car grew fainter in the rearview mirror, David felt a lump rise in his throat. He didn't understand why, but that feeling made him want to turn back. He wanted to learn more about them, wanted to understand why life had led him to this moment, to this place. Was it just a coincidence, or was there something he couldn't see yet? He smiled a smile that felt like self-reassurance. No, I can't keep thinking this way. I've helped them already. What more is there? David raised his hand, loosening his stiff jaw from exhaustion, and continued driving. The storm outside was still raging, but there was something warm in his heart, though it didn't come from the outside world. He realized that no matter how harsh life could be, no matter what challenges he faced, he could still do good. And that made him feel that life had meaning. An hour passed, and finally David arrived. The empty road, long and endless, was buried in a thick blanket of snow. He saw the lights from a gas station ahead, a place where he could rest, refuel the truck, and recharge himself. The snowstorm outside hadn't lessened, but it seemed David no longer felt fear or anxiety. Everything now felt more bearable. David pulled into the gas station, parked slowly, and sighed. He stepped out of the truck, walked into the small cafe next to the station to get a hot coffee. As he entered, the cozy warmth of the cafe made him feel much better. The warm yellow lights, the gentle music playing from the speakers, calmed him. He stood there for a moment, looking around, then received his coffee from the barista. While he waited, a man entered the cafe with a cold and tired expression. He had sharp eyes and looked at David with curiosity. David nodded in greeting, but the man remained silent, as if unaware of his presence. As David took the coffee and stepped outside, a cold gust of wind swept through, making him shiver. Standing in the silent space of the storm, David again felt small and lonely. But then the image of Sarah's family flashed in his mind. He smiled, the warmth returned. They were a part of his life, and thinking about that made his heart feel lighter. That night, after resting and refueling the truck, David continued on his journey. The snow continued falling, but now he didn't feel isolated anymore. He knew he wasn't alone, that good people were always present in this life. Though he couldn't fully understand everything that was happening, there was one thing he knew for sure. Every small act, every bit of help created connections that we sometimes don't realize immediately. But when we look back, we see that this life is filled with miracles, small things that hold immense meaning. The snowstorm continued, but David no longer felt afraid. He kept driving, knowing that each step he took had a purpose. And no matter how strong the storm outside was, he knew he had overcome it all, not just with his own strength, but through the kindness he had received from others. David drove alone through the night. The snowstorm still raged on, but inside him there was a different feeling. It was no longer the coldness of the world outside, but a warmth indescribable, as if the pieces of an unwritten story had begun to find each other. He couldn't shake the image of Sarah's family, nor could he stop the stirrings when he remembered their eyes full of gratitude and appreciation. The feeling he had once experienced when receiving help from them now returned, and it made his heart feel different in ways he couldn't explain. Despite the desolate, tiring road, David wasn't in a rush. Each stretch of road passed slowly, and in his mind, the image of Sarah's family remained vivid. He wondered, should I stop and meet them again? But he knew the snowstorm outside would not let up, and there was still an important task ahead. Yet the worry for them lingered in his heart. Eventually, he decided to rest at a small motel by the roadside. When he entered the room, he shrugged off his cold jacket, sat on the soft bed, and looked out the window. The snow continued falling relentlessly, but now the streetlights cast an odd glow through the snowflakes, bringing a strange sense of peace. It felt as though good things always existed, no matter how harsh the world outside seemed. A few hours later, as he prepared to leave the room to grab dinner, his phone rang unexpectedly. David looked at the screen in surprise. It was Sarah's number. He picked up the phone. "Hello, David. This is Sarah. I know you helped us so much during the storm, but we didn't want you to leave without inviting you to dinner. Could you come to my house? We want to thank you again." Her voice came gently but with concern from the other side. David was surprised, but his heart warmed. "Oh, there's no need for that. I only helped a little." "No," Sarah cut him off. "It's not just a little. You saved us in a dangerous situation. We want to invite you for dinner, at least as a thank you. I'll wait for you if you agree." David smiled softly, feeling the sincerity in Sarah's voice. "All right, I'll come. But don't go overboard. Okay?" Minutes later, David drove to Sarah's house, a small but cozy home tucked behind tall trees rising up in the dark. As he entered, a warm draft from the kitchen greeted him, making him feel at ease. In the living room, the soft yellow light illuminated everything from the sofas to the paintings on the walls. It was a simple space, but filled with warmth and love. Sarah stood up, smiling brightly. She wore a warm sweater and seemed genuinely pleased to see David. "Thank you for coming. Please come in, we've prepared dinner." David stepped inside, feeling a wave of warmth spread through him. This wasn't just a meal. It was a connection, a response to the kindness he had shown this family. As he sat down at the dinner table, James, Sarah's husband, also smiled. "Thank you, David. Although we can never repay you enough, at least we want to invite you to a warm meal as a thank you." David smiled, replying, "No need to thank me. I just did what felt right." Sarah set the food on the table, steaming soup, freshly baked bread, and a few simple yet nutritious dishes. The aroma filled the air, making the home feel even warmer. The family sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed naturally. Throughout the dinner, the atmosphere was intimate. James spoke about his work, the future plans for their family, while Sarah shared the difficulties in life and the small challenges they had overcome together. Each story was light, yet full of emotion. The whole family talked happily without any awkwardness or worries. David felt completely at ease. He didn't know where to start, but as he watched Sarah's family gather around the table, he felt the warmth and connection he had been longing for. He listened intently, sensing the love in every word, every simple story. It was a peaceful feeling he hadn't had for a long time. After dinner, the family sat down to drink tea. During this time, Sarah looked at David, her eyes bright. "You know, David, I had heard about you before we met. Not because you were famous, but because I heard the story of a man who had been through so much in life, but always stood up and helped others. That's why I feel so grateful that we met you. Thank you for giving us the chance to help someone like you." David was a bit surprised, but he didn't deny it. In truth, Sarah's words were somewhat true. He had once been a failure with nothing but despair and frustration. But he had never given up, and in a moment he realized that it was the challenges in life that had shaped him into who he was today. "Helping each other is natural," David said softly. "But I truly thank you for helping me when I needed it most. Your family showed me that sometimes life gives us valuable opportunities even in the darkest moments." Sarah and James listened quietly. A sense of relief washed over the space, and David felt an understanding, a connection that he had never found elsewhere. The dinner ended in warmth and intimacy. Sarah's family walked him to the door, and just before he stepped into his truck, Sarah smiled. "We'll always remember you, David," she said, her eyes sincere. David smiled and nodded. "Thank you, and I'll always remember you. Thank you for helping me realize something important. Kindness and connection between people are essential in life." He got into his truck and drove off. But in his heart, the feeling of peace lingered. He no longer felt alone because he knew that in this life, no one had to walk alone. Every time we help, we open a new opportunity to find true connection and the deep values we sometimes don't realize right away. And in that snowstorm, David knew that no matter how harsh the world could be, love and kindness would always be the things that could light the way and guide us to the warmest places. David sat in his truck, the lights from Sarah's house fading behind him. The warmth from that cozy evening still lingered in his heart. The smell of food, the laughter of the family, the sincerity in every glance, all of it was like a sweet melody in his heart. He felt lighter than ever, as if a part of him had been healed. The empty road, the snow still falling steadily. But inside the truck, David felt a different air. He no longer felt swept up in the endless worries of life. Instead, he felt like a part of something bigger, like a chain of connections between people, strangers who had become familiar in simple moments. These thoughts lingered in his mind as he continued driving. Even though dinner had ended, the feeling of connection he found in Sarah's family continued to resonate in his heart. They weren't just people he had helped. They were a reflection of what he had lost and was searching for. Again, family sharing mutual care. They weren't just the ones he had helped, they were his friends, his companions in this journey of life. David smiled, feeling lighter as he thought of the simple things Sarah's family had brought into his life. And because of that, he realized that sometimes the good things in life don't have to come from great changes or grand milestones, but from small meetings, from sincere glances, and humble sharing. But as the snowstorm continued to fall outside, David couldn't help but ask himself, what could he do to repay Sarah's family in a meaningful way? Could the kindness they had shown him be turned into something more significant? The gratitude he felt was strong, but also a bit confusing. He didn't know what to do to show that what he had received today truly mattered to him. He recalled the times he had failed in life, when he stood at a crossroads, not knowing which way to go. It was Sarah's family who had shown him that even in the darkest moments, there was always kindness, always connection. And that was enough to help him move forward. David didn't know if Sarah's family realized this, but he felt that he couldn't just stop at one dinner, one simple thank you. He wanted to do something bigger to repay them by helping others just like they had helped him. And in that moment, David realized that every small action, though seemingly insignificant, could create an endless chain of kindness if it was multiplied. He returned to the motel where he had stopped before meeting Sarah's family. By the time he reached his room, it was late. But instead of falling asleep, his mind was full of thoughts. He took out his phone, opened a note-taking app. The thoughts about kindness, about what he wanted to do, poured out in lines of text. It wasn't a grand decision, but small actions he could take every day to help others, just to realize that life wasn't only about himself, but about those around him. He had no idea that these thoughts would lead him to a turning point in his life. The next day, when the snowstorm had died down, David continued his journey. But today he felt that he was no longer a solitary driver, just a passerby. He began to see more clearly the importance of the connection between people, and he realized that kindness could change the world. A small action, a kind gesture would create a ripple of change. As he drove, he remembered the stories Sarah had shared about her family, the challenges they had overcome, and he realized another truth. People don't just help each other when things are easy. Sometimes it's in the hardest times that we truly see the value of humanity. And Sarah's family was proof of that. David stopped at a cafe by the road, a place he had stopped many times before. He walked in and found a quiet corner to sit. Looking out the window, he saw the morning sunlight shining on the snow-covered ground. The scene was as peaceful as a painting, and inside him, a strange sense of calm arose. As he took a sip of coffee, he thought back to the dinner the night before. The stories, the laughter, the gratitude, all of it left a deep impression on him. Sarah's eyes, the children sitting at the dinner table, the warmth in the way they welcomed him into their home. Everything had soaked into his heart, and he felt he had been given a precious gift, not material, but a feeling he had never found, the feeling of connection, kindness, and family. David set the coffee cup down, looking out the window. He thought to himself, "This life is truly wonderful. If I can help just one person, if I can give them something like what Sarah's family gave me, then all my efforts will have been worth it." As he left the cafe, David felt like he had found something in his life. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but now he was no longer afraid. He had a new mission, a new purpose to not only help those around him, but to spread love, kindness, and connection in the community. Dinner with Sarah's family wasn't just a simple meal. It was the beginning of a new journey, a journey David would take with those he could help just as they had helped him. And in this life, that was the most important thing. David drove through the empty roads, but today his heart felt different. The snowstorm had subsided, but within him, a warm flame was slowly growing, one he had never felt before. The kindness he had received from Sarah's family was no longer just a simple feeling of gratitude. It had become a powerful force, urging him to act to spread that goodness to others. He recalled the previous evening when Sarah's family had gathered around the dinner table sharing stories and the warmth that enveloped the room. Those moments had sparked a new faith in him, not just in life, but in humanity. For the first time in many years, he felt he truly had a place to return to. That realization made him understand that no matter how harsh life could be, kindness always existed and could create miracles even in the darkest of times. The more David drove, the clearer his thoughts became. He knew he couldn't keep living in the past, only clinging to beautiful memories. He wanted to do something to repay the kindness Sarah's family had shown him, but he didn't know where to start. Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. How can I spread this kindness to more people? David stopped at a gas station on the side of the road, not because he needed gas, but because he needed some time to think more clearly about the question in his mind. He walked into the small cafe inside the station, where the warm yellow lights illuminated everything, and the cozy atmosphere made him feel relaxed. He ordered a hot coffee, sat in a corner, and looked out the window where the snow had started to melt, leaving small water streaks on the ground. He sat there quietly sipping his coffee, reflecting on everything he had been through. He remembered the difficult months before when he struggled with loneliness and despair. It was Sarah's family who had helped him get through that time. They gave him an opportunity when he had nothing left. And now, in this very moment, he realized that the kindness they had shown him wasn't just about helping in an emergency. It had opened up a new path for him, a path he had never considered before. David didn't just want to thank them. He wanted to do more than that. He wanted to help others the way Sarah and James had helped him, but he didn't know where to begin. He wasn't wealthy, didn't have resources or great influence. He was just an ordinary truck driver, working hard to make a living. But in this moment, he realized that sometimes the most beautiful things come from small actions, from slow steps that hold deep meaning. Back in his truck, David began thinking about the people around him. For many years, he had only known his own life, never considering helping others, unless it was absolutely necessary. But now he saw clearly that kindness wasn't just an action. It was an endless circle. When you do something good for one person, you not only help them through their struggles, but also create a ripple effect that reaches others. And if each of us did that, society would be so much better. David kept driving, and his thoughts became clearer. He decided he would start with the smallest things, the things he could do right now. He would begin helping those in need, even with the smallest gestures. He would do good not because he expected something in return, but because he knew these actions would create a significant change. When he returned to the city, David started taking action. Every day he tried to help those he encountered on the road, from street vendors to homeless people he came across, whether it was buying a meal for them or simply offering a kind word. These small acts brought him a strange warmth. He realized that kindness didn't have to be grand. Sometimes it was simply showing concern, offering a small gesture that could change someone's entire day. One day, as he drove down a street, he saw a middle-aged man struggling to fix a broken bicycle. David didn't hesitate. He stopped his truck, got out, and asked if the man needed help. The man looked at him surprised, then smiled. "Thank you. I just need a few tools to fix this bike," he said. David didn't just help the man fix his bicycle. He also bought him a cup of hot coffee, and they sat together talking about life. The man shared that he had lost his job and was struggling to support his family. David listened and felt the hardship the man was facing. It was a simple moment, but in David's heart, it brought a deep sense of satisfaction. He understood that even small acts could create big changes, even if just in the life of one person. In the following weeks, David continued to act in this way. He helped those around him without expecting anything in return. Each action, each small gesture made him feel like part of something bigger. And every time he helped someone, he thought of Sarah's family, the ones who had helped him when he needed it most. The kindness they had shown him had now been spread, and David felt part of an endless circle. A month later, during a delivery trip, David ran into Sarah and James again. This time it wasn't in the snowstorm, but at a familiar cafe he had stopped by many times before. When they recognized each other, Sarah and James stood up, their faces lighting up with friendly smiles. "David, what a surprise," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling with joy. David smiled, looking at them with deep gratitude. "I've been helping a few people on the road, just like you helped me." "That's wonderful," James said, patting David on the back. "We're so proud of you. What you're doing is a great example of spreading kindness." David felt a warmth in his heart. He wasn't just the recipient of kindness anymore. Now he had become part of that circle. He knew that every time he helped someone, he was making a change not only for them, but also for himself. And if all of us did that, the circle of kindness would keep growing, never stopping. The conversation with Sarah's family made David realize something important. Kindness is an invisible force that can change a person's life and even change the world. What matters is not what you receive, but what you can give. And in that circle, everyone can become the person who changes another person's life. David smiled lightly, feeling a deep peace within himself. He knew that no matter where he went or what he did, he would always carry with him the valuable lessons Sarah's family had taught him. Kindness never fades, and it can always be spread to create great change. And in the snowstorm of life, David had found something precious. Kindness is the light that shines even in the darkest of times.